there's no limit to the number of people who can experience some degree of pelvic floor stuff. So if you think that just a little bit of sneeze pee is okay and it's totally normal, it is normal, but we can change it. Or if you run, when you run or jump, you get that little bit of leaking. These are indications that there's something going on with your pelvic floor that's not working its absolute best, and there are things you can do to change it. And one of the things that you can do to change it right away with no time or money or major effort beyond your brain is to change the way you think about what you need your pelvic floor to do. And for most of us in the Western world, what we need to do with our pelvic floors is to relax rather than to tighten. So we have this big, do Kegels, tighten, lift, contract. For a lot of us, really what we actually need to do is to let go. And that's counterintuitive. So do this little thought experiment. If I were to say to you, this is a ball, and it's going to be really good for your hand and arm muscles if you just hold on to this ball all the time. Just a little bit all the time. Whenever you're thinking of it, just squeeze that ball a little bit. And you did that for 10 or 20 or 30 or 40 or 50 years. At a certain point, what's going to happen is either you're not going to be able to drop the ball anymore, your hand is going to stay in this shape, or your hand muscles are they're going to just not want to do this anymore and you're going to drop the ball. So your pelvic floor muscles are no different than any other muscle in your body. They don't adapt well to just holding on a little bit all of the time. It means that they're not using their full range. So that's one thing. Just sitting here, can you actually relax your pelvic floor? Because you may find you're holding more tension in your pelvic floor than you think you are. So that's one thing. Just see if you can let go a little bit. And this is, in fact, a very important part of a healthy pelvic floor and healthy pelvic floor function. But what if it doesn't really work for you to just think about relaxing your pelvic floor and you can't quite connect to that concept? In the same way that it's sometimes difficult to release tight or stiff or unresponsive muscles, and if you work them a little bit, then it becomes easier to release them. The pelvic floor might be the same for you, that it makes sense to, in fact, activate and contract a little bit in order to find that sense of energy and movement, and that's what makes it possible for you to then identify what it is you're releasing. So if it's challenging for you to just kind of work your pelvic floor, it feels a bit amorphous, you can use a mirroring technique. So you take your hand, and as you squeeze your hand, you also contract your pelvic floor. And then you release your hand, and as you release your hand, you release your pelvic floor. And for some people, that can be a really effective way of connecting. The other thing you can do is squeeze your jaw. There's a nice connection from sort of your feet, your pelvic floor, your jaw, your diaphragm. They all talk nicely to each other. So you can squeeze your jaw and contract your pelvic floor at the same time. Squeeze and lift, and then relax, relax your jaw. You've got an actual movement you can do here that helps sometimes to mirror what you want your pelvic floor to be doing, so that you get a little work in the same way that if you squeeze your inner thighs and release and squeeze and release and you work your inner thighs, sometimes your inner thighs stretch and release, become more accessible to you. We want to have your pelvic floor accessible to you, that you can feel it, that you can relax it, you can contract it, you can have some awareness and some control of what's happening. And so that when you're just going through your life, you don't have to be controlling it. You've done enough stuff to keep the muscles pliable and able so that you can just move around in your life, and those muscles can then respond effectively and appropriately to whatever actions you're doing, whatever pressures are being created internally, so that you don't have sneeze pee or running pee or jumping pee or trampoline pee or weightlifting pee. So what else could we do? One of the other things to be aware of in terms of pelvic floor function is that your pelvic floor is part of your core. your pelvic floor, your abdominal muscles, your back muscles, your diaphragm, and to a certain extent also your glutes, are part of that central torso power place. And we are so cultured to grip and work and suck it in and keep it all looking toned and tight and fantastic. There are consequences to that, and they are not necessarily good consequences. They don't necessarily lead to strength, no matter what you've been told by the media or whoever it is that tells you to suck in your gut. So your stomach muscles are the same thing. That idea of always holding your stomach muscles in a little bit, which many of us have been told over and over the years. It's the same idea. If you squeeze your stomach muscles all of the time, then that pressure has to go somewhere else because everything is connected. Your internal pressures have an effect within that sort of container of diaphragm, stomach, back, pelvic floor. So if you're always squeezing your stomach muscles in, that pressure is being displaced somewhere else. And often it's being displaced down. So in the same way that it is not helpful to walk around squeezing a ball all of the time, it is not helpful to walk around squeezing your stomach muscle all the time. It's not helpful for your ab strength, and it's also not helpful for your pelvic floor function. So, in addition to releasing your pelvic floor, can you also release your stomach muscles? And this is a huge and challenging brain thing for most of us, because it's going to mean your stomach muscles letting go a little bit means you're going to get bigger, right? The stuff that you've been sucking in and holding in and looking super fantastic has to be allowed to travel out. And that is not something we are typically encouraged to do. So play with that. And then in terms of your movement patterns, there are a couple of really great little strategies that we can take a look at. So let's do that next. So sometimes we have kind of a pelvis forward position that we stand in. I am super inclined to stand like this. So if you think of your pelvic floor living here in your pelvis, now my pelvis is on an angle, my pelvic floor is also on an angle. So it's not getting loaded the way we want it to by the downward weight of your internal organs, but it's also shortening and tightening things at the back, right? You're getting less support from your glutes. So a great pelvic floor everyday concept is to think about bringing your pelvic floor parallel to the ground. Can you see how that changes the angle of my legs? Now my legs are vertical. To do that, it's not about just taking your, can you see now how I'm falling backwards? So you want to shift your pelvis back, you want to let your shoulders come forward. You'll probably feel super slumpy. If you look in the mirror, you probably aren't. But one of the things that's causing that, that's not just your, like, I just feel like standing like this. It's about tension here through the back chain is pushing you forward, or your body would kind of be pulling back if you weren't counterweighting with your pelvis. So to address that tension along the back line, use a half dome or roll up a towel or a blanket, something that's going to give you some solidity underneath your foot. And bring both fronts of your feet up on the thing that you're using, and then have a chair or a counter or a table or something that you're going to lean on. And you're going to hinge your butt back. So see how there's a little bit of a curve here in my lower back? That's what we're looking for, as opposed to this, right? When your pelvis is tucking around, now if I come back up, hey look, guess what? My pelvis is in that tucked position again. This is what we're trying to get your body to understand and to get away from this all the time. Variations on that. So you want to keep your arms long and straight. You want to keep the base of your ribs a little bit solid and lifted from the front so that you're not collapsing. And if this is not comfortable on your back, keep coming up until your back feels good, or come down until your back feels good. What we're looking for is a little bit of working length in the backs of your legs. So it's like there's a wall behind you and you are pushing back into the wall rather than you're just collapsing into a big stretch, right? So you want to find that sense of connection. Connection to the back of your legs, connection into your calves, connection into your heels, connection to some support at the front, and then this nice releasey, relaxy feeling here through your lower back and the top of your pelvis. And this, every day, a couple of times a day if you have time for it, is a fantastic support to your pelvic floor. And so, what I can suggest for you is this combination of release your pelvic floor, find a little sense of connecting and working through your pelvic floor, whether that is just engaging and that works for you, or whether it's bringing another body part in to mirror what you want your pelvic floor to be doing, or your jaw, right? And then just find a nice, stable way to get some length from your feet, through your calves, through your hamstrings, to your hips. And as you're moving around in your day, just remind yourself periodically to think of your pelvic floor being parallel to the ground in ways that have no negative consequence, right? So you're not putting yourself into a position where your back doesn't feel good or your neck doesn't feel good. It's gradual, right? Slow changes. Those are the sustainable, long-term, lifelong changes that we want to make for healthy, functional pelvic floor, healthy, functional hips, and just the capacity to do whatever you want to do for all of your life. So if you have questions, let me know. Pop them into the comments down below, and we can chat more pelvic floor later.